Today I want to talk about something that's like particular to that's just come up like particular to Spain. But the reason that I'm going to talk about it is because it's not like things that happen in certain countries, especially when they're like EU, NATO member countries. Those things often like percolate out into other places. So there's a new thing that's been floated around that the government's trying to institute, and it's like a digital ID to be able to view certain sites on the internet. And so in Spain there's already like a national ID that was, as far as I know, I think it's like hundreds of years. It's it was before the Civil War that this existed anyway. So Spain's got like quite a history of people think that it's quite normal to just have a national ID, and like so. Whereas people in the UK, I remember like there was a talk. Probably there's a gun like this at home. It's well, I'm the only one who uses it. There was a talk when like Tony Blair was in power in the UK like a long time ago. Was that the end of the 90s? Yeah, it was. I remember he proposed a national identity thing, and I remember people who were like, certainly not Labour voters, like people at university who were like lecturers in the faculty in physics and stuff, and they were totally against it. I remember them like talking to like the French people who were doing PhDs were like, they were saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with it. What's the problem? It's just so convenient. It's much better." And the guy just said, "Yeah, but we're not a police state." And this was back in the late 90s, and it really struck me. It was like, wow, because I was kind of used to the idea as well, because obviously my dad's Spanish, and although at that time I didn't have an ID card, I had a passport, and I was quite aware of, I used to spend, I'd come to Spain a lot in my summers and stuff, and not having a national ID card was quite an impediment to a lot of things that I needed, that I wanted to do or needed to do. And in fact, when I didn't have one, it was like people would look at me like as if I had two heads. It's like, why don't you have one? What's going on? You're some kind of criminal or something. So anyway, I'm not so much a digression, more like setting the scene. So now this has been floated. And the idea is that, so for certain internet sites, which basically means porn, you're going to need to have like one of these ID cards. And so what that means is it's linked, like so your internet ID card is directly linked to like your citizen ID card. And so that's the first step of them knowing what you look at on the internet. But also, bizarrely, you get like, you're allowed like 30 visits a month or something. So like, the rationing side of it just seems like completely bizarre. It's like, right, so, why would you be limited to visiting, 30, going to a pornographic site like 30 times in 1 month or something? I don't know, it just seems like completely bizarre. But anyway, I'm not so much concerned about the specifics of it, of what you can do, what you can't do. Obviously, being like an anarchist, a voluntarist, someone who believes in self-ownership, the idea that the government, a state, can tell me what internet sites I can go to or not, it's just like anathema to me. That's just not on. Because the thing is, what we've had, so in the last European elections, one of the things that's happened was there was this political, I wouldn't even say political party, it was like some guy who was like an independent. I mean, they call him a troublemaker, and you know what? He is a troublemaker. I think that he'd be quite happy to be called that, because what he does is he exposes corruption, and the reason that he's so loathed is that he does it right across the board. So if he was, they call him far right, obviously, because that's just what everyone calls everyone these days. But he's got it in just as much for like the right wing parties in Spain as he has for the left wing parties. I mean, I think his personal political bias is like, he's sort of like a right of centre type of guy, but whatever. But he's got it for it, in for everyone, all types of corruption. And he's just started from like Telegram, and so much so that there was actually, the Spanish government was trying to ban Telegram in Spain. And that's just, if that doesn't make people see that, the state is there to protect its own interests, and like the party that's in power at any given time is just transient. It's the state that has the power. And what's kind of what I find, I mean, I'm not sure, the concept of statism in Spain is like, it's different to like the statism in, say, the UK. I mean, they're the only two countries that I've been exposed to, so I don't know what's more like the general statism throughout the world or whatever, but it's like people, so I see like, there's this concept in like the UK which like, I've heard like all my life where like they'll say things like, an Englishman's home is his castle and stuff like that. And like the point of that is like, state, yeah, whatever, but when this is mine, there are absolute limits to what I'm prepared to accept, the state to do. Whereas in Spain, people don't seem to have that concept, even to the extent where, as far, I think that like, you've got to be very careful when you're defending your house. If you get broken into, you've got to be very careful what happens when you're defending your house. And for instance, it happened recently, an old guy shot an armed intruder, and so he was in there with his wife, his old wife. This guy's like 80 or something. And what happened was, in the course of the interview with the judge, like the judge got him to basically say that he was defending his property rather than he was defending his life. That he was scared for, and he's gone to prison. That old man is in jail for killing some guy. So you think, oh, it's terrible, yeah, he killed the guy and stuff. But what we found out later is this guy who broke in had already shot a bunch of people and like got out, and it's just, anyway. So there are people in Spain who actually say, yeah, but if you kill someone to defend your property, that means that you value your property more than someone's life. And there's, I think that's a thing that we, people say things very often and don't think about them. So that's like when I say about, like having principles and things like that, whereas what I mean by that is, it's the initial point from which, you start off at like some fundamental concept that you hold dear, and then that's what you extrapolate from that, and like that's where your ideas come from, and that's why you have principles. And that's why sometimes we just like box things up, because going through that process again and again is tiresome. it's tedious, tiresome, and you're like, oh. But that's why also sometimes when you're like getting down to like your principles and actually really understanding what you believe and what you actually think is right, then that's why our opinions can change over time. So the idea of like saying that, you value your property. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't value my things more than I do another human life. I don't. And in fact, I don't know if I've said this before, but there was like, I don't know how long, about 12 years ago or something like that, we were living in a house that's like like in the countryside, and there was a wildfire and it was coming close to the house, and we got evacuated. And so we went out. I think we only had 2 kids then, and I was literally thinking, my house could just get burnt down. And so like you're thinking, what do we need to take? What can we take with us that'll fit in the boots? And obviously we didn't have much time. And so I took my computer so that I could actually work the next day. I had loads of computers, and I only took the one I was working on. I took my guitars, and I said goodbye to everything else in my mind. Like all my other belongings, just like, I just, the only way that I could actually not go into panic was just to sort of like, there was like my mind and my belongings, and I just had to go cut, just cut that thread in my mind. And I've never got over it. Now I don't really care about my possessions, because it was just this thing where I just had to just let it go, and I did, and it's affected me, quite profoundly. It was like, that's one of the like points of inflection in my life where I really did. I mean, because like I've got loads of CDs, like they're nearly all metal CDs, and like they're all like loads of things that you can't get on Spotify, and all stuff like that. So I don't want to lose those things, but it was just faced with the situation where I literally, the only thing I cared about was my kids and my wife, and it was just, and when we were driving out, so like the thing is, this is like a house in the countryside, and it's like a little estate that's, it's only got one road that goes out. And as we were driving out, and like there's loads of cars, because we were all getting evacuated, and we were going dead slow, and there was just smoke coming over the road, and it was like literally, I didn't know where the fire was, I couldn't see it, but also we were like, it's like hilly and stuff, so for all I knew, the fire was right under the side of the hill. And I was that was a concern to me. I was worried about getting out, especially for my kids, because they were babies. And it was just the last thing on my mind then was like my belongings, and it was just, I honestly thought that I was going to go back like in a few days and just see this burnt out husk of a house. And anyway, it turns out that nothing happened. It was okay, it didn't even get, the fire got close, but it didn't even get to a place that I could see the burnt stuff from my house. Although you could see it from the road. And but I didn't manage to like, I didn't even try to make the connection between like what is important to me and all the stuff that's in my house. So that's why like I can honestly say, with 100% honesty, if someone breaks into my house, I'm not looking to protect my stuff. I'm not. But I am looking to protect my kids, and my wife. And I don't want anyone, I do take my, my home is very much my castle type of thing. And I say that like, I don't even particularly, I've never really felt English. I don't, when you're brought up in, I think when you're brought up like in two cultures, because like, my dad was born at the end of the 40s. he lived through like a large part of the well, pretty much all of the dictatorship in Spain, and so like his outlook on life when he was my dad, when he was young and raising me, was not the same as like my classmates' parents' outlook on life, and and that affects it not just, and I'd say in a positive way. So, and I think in the same way, my kids, even though like obviously I'm completely integrated and even to the extent of like having, a completely Spanish name and all that, but everyone knows that, I'm considered English because that's just the way it works, and it's not just the way it works in Spain; it's the way it works everywhere. We always find like a reason for like someone who looks a bit different to be labelled as, oh, it's because of this or it's because of that. So, for instance, when I was like just the way I was, or growing up, if I was a bit quirky or something, it'd always be, oh, it's because his dad's Spanish. Whereas now it's like, if I don't have the same opinion as everyone else, it's like, oh, it's because he's English. It's like, well, it's not both. Or like the example I always use is like, if you've got like family who see your kids and they know what you like, what your wife looks like, but they don't particularly know what her family looks like. So when they see your kids, all they see in you, in them, is you, and like you're part of the family. That's just, I've seen that happen, which is amusing because when my Spanish family see my kids, oh, they just look exactly like us. That's what they think. Whereas when my English family see my kids, it's like, oh, they just look exactly like us. And it's like, because of that, I look at my kids and I can see bits of both families. But when we're sort of just used to seeing one thing, or we only have part of the information, then we only see the part of the information that applies to that. And so when you're talking about kids, it's obvious because like they've actually got objective features that look in a certain way, but it's just the way we polarize our worldview based on our experiences. We just see things through that lens. So back to the original thing I was talking about, this passport to see porno sites. So to me, it's not interesting the fact that it's like about pornography, but what is interesting is the fact that it's the excuse is to save the kids. It's like, oh, because children have access to to pornography now that they've all got mobiles and tablets. And it's like, really? Is that what we're saying? We're going to set up this whole thing to like stop children, protect the children. And it's not like, if my kids have got obviously phones and tablets because it's just the society that we live in, but I've got it all locked down. You know what I mean? It's not impossible to stop them watching stuff. I can't stop other kids going up and showing them the mobile, but when I was a kid, you could find pornography, and I used to live in a place that was just opposite the woods, and so when we were lucky, someone would dump a load of pornography in the woods, and so it's just something that it's what. So should people just it's like eliminating plastic bags so that you can't put porno mags in them or something, or banning paper. It doesn't make sense, but the real fundamental thing is that nobody seems to be going on about, at least in Spain, is really, who is the government to tell me what I can and can't watch, or see, or what information, because this is the thin end of the wedge. So like in Spain, there's already they're already going to start teaching educating kids about like fake news and things like that on the internet. And basically, fake news is just anything that the current government doesn't believe in. I remember not so long ago when there was a Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, and someone asked him about climate change. Now we're talking, if you're going to have on one end, perhaps, perhaps we don't know as much about the climate as we think we do. So maybe we shouldn't do certain radical things because we don't know if it'll work. On the other end, you're going to have stuff like the Queen's a shapeshifting lizard and things like that. And so you can't just chop off one end. You know what I mean? You can't chop off one end of a seesaw and keep it in balance. And that's kind of the problem. And people did used to burn books. That was a real thing. The Nazis burnt books. The church burnt books. And it's to get concepts just, out of the zeitgeist, or stop people reading stuff, or stop people knowing things. And even if those things are incorrect, we still have the right to like go down, paths and, be bombarded with stuff, and then you think, oh, that's just a load of nonsense, and then you can go and study something else. But there are a lot of things that are mutually exclusive, for instance, in the world, like in terms of, think of religion. When like people say, oh yeah, well, maybe they're all right. Well, they can't actually all be right. I'm not saying that it's not, did like the Abrahamics. Yeah, so they come from the same books, and so, in theory, it's the same God that they're worshipping. But in practice it isn't, because, a Christian wouldn't kill like a Muslim or a Jew, really, if he thought that he was going to go to, if you're going to have on one end, perhaps, perhaps we don't know as much about the climate as we think we do. So maybe we shouldn't do certain radical things because we don't know if it'll work. On the other end, you're going to have stuff like the Queen's a shapeshifting lizard and things like that. And so you can't just chop off one end. You know what I mean? You can't chop off one end of a seesaw and keep it in balance. And that's kind of the problem. And people did used to burn books. That was a real thing. The Nazis burnt books. The church burnt books. And it's to get concepts just, out of the zeitgeist, or stop people reading stuff, or stop people knowing things. And even if those things are incorrect, we still have the right to like go down, paths and, be bombarded with stuff, and then you think, oh, that's just a load of nonsense, and then you can go and study something else. But there are a lot of things that are mutually exclusive, for instance, in the world, like in terms of, think of religion. When like people say, oh yeah, well, maybe they're all right. Well, they can't actually all be right. I'm not saying that it's not, did like the Abrahamics. Yeah, so they come from the same books, and so, in theory, it's the same God that they're worshipping. But in practice it isn't, because, a Christian wouldn't kill like a Muslim or a Jew, really, if he thought that he was going to go to, these two people are, worshipping the same God. And we don't even need to go on about like, maybe what Muslims would do, and how much they think that it's the same God. You know what I mean? You ask someone in ISIS if they think that the Jews are worshipping Allah, and it's like, I don't think you get much in the way of agreement. So the point is, there are things that are objectively wrong that people talk about on the internet. So then it might just be a matter of time until we say, hold on, look, this isn't true. So if you're going to, we can't have fake news on the internet. So some of these have to get taken away. They can't all be right. So why don't we get the experts in to decide which one's true? Christianity, Islam, or Judaism? I mean, imagine that. But it's sort of the path that we're going down. I mean, personally, I think it's ridiculous. I'm not an atheist, but I'm not what you call a deist either. I see divinity in the universe. I see divinity in people. I think that human life has value. That's kind of where I'm approaching things. And I don't think that you need to pray X amount of times a day or go to a church on certain days of the week or to be a good person, for instance. So I just thought I'd bring it up because it's important and it's fundamental to voluntary, your self-ownership. It also goes to the extent of, so if I own me, I can decide what I want to put into me. And it's not just about medical interventions, it's about, what do I want to see, what do I want to read, what should I be allowed to read? And it's in the same way that my fist ends at someone else's face, I believe that that's true, but I don't, as long as you're not forcing people to see things or know things, then I think everything goes. And as long as for you to create certain material, you're not hurting anyone else. And by hurting, I mean hurting. I don't mean offending, because that's not, let's just be adults about this. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's what I got taught. I got taught that in school. Teachers would say, I'm fat. And then the teachers would just come up and say, well, it wasn't very nice, but sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. I'm like, oh yeah, and, bit by bit you're like, oh yeah, of course. And that's just not where we are right now. So I hope I'm wrong. I know I'm not, but I hope I'm wrong. But I'll let you know how this thing pans out. You have to be getting your YouTube licenses to be able to watch crazy people like me rant on while cooking food. Anyway, this is done. Thanks for watching. It's great when I receive likes. It's it just lets me know that, although I see the things that people are watching it, but it's nice to know that actually someone likes it. So thanks very much for leaving likes, and please consider leaving likes and comments and subscribing. Subscribing is great for me. So yeah, here's my lunch. I'll put it in the plate. Have a nice day. It's lovely weather here today. It's not cold anymore. We had a bit of asymptomatic global warming lately. We're back on track now, so that's good. See you around.